Greg Mahle struggled to keep the last of his family-run restaurants afloat in Ohio. When it finally closed, he was broke, unsure of what to do next. Then a stranded van load of puppies changed his life forever. Join journalist Paul Zheutlin as he travels with Greg from Ohio to the Gulf Coast on his rescue road trips to bring hard-luck dogs from the deep south to loving families up north. With the help of many selfless volunteers along the way, from Houston's impoverished 5th Ward, where thousands of strays roam the streets, and high-kill shelters in Louisiana, to joyous scenes of adopters embracing their new pups in the Northeast. Rescue Road is full of heart and inspiring story, and a unique bond between dogs and humans, and how going the extra mile can make life-changing difference for those loyal canines and for all of us. Peter Zheutlin, the author of Around the World on Two Wheels, is a freelance journalist whose work has appeared regularly in the Boston Globe, Christian Science Monitor. Peter has also written for the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, AARP, the magazine, and other publications. He lives in Needham, Massachusetts. Please welcome Peter and Greg.
It's really refreshing to talk to a group that isn't mainly comprised of my mother's friends. Thank you all for coming, and also thanks to the bookstore. You know, as many of you know, it's tough competition for independent bookstores competing with the online retailers, and stores like this are a tremendous community asset. You don't get this kind of experience shopping. What we all do occasionally, go to Amazon, I do myself, but you know, when you can, come to a bookstore like this. They just don't sell everything. They choose books that they think you'll like to read. So thanks to them for hosting us. And by the way, most writers know this is a great place to come, to this particular bookstore. I know a lot of you have met Greg before. How many people have picked up dogs from Greg before? Okay. I want to assure you he's actually...
For those of you who can't see this, I think 99% of the hands in the room went up.
The guy that you see looks like he stepped off an outtake of Game of Thrones, you know, a dirty poop smeared t-shirt with his dog. This is the same guy. He cleans up better than I thought he would. So anyway, I want to start by telling you how this book came to be. 3 years ago, I lost a 20-year running, I won't call it an argument, I call it more of a tug of war with my wife and my kids who pleaded for a dog. And I was adamantly opposed, and we tried goldfish, we tried a cockatiel and turtles and all these things, you know, trying to keep this dog thing at bay. I had a lot of concerns about a dog. I didn't want to get up at 4 o'clock in February and walk on sheets of ice so it could do its business. I didn't want to clean up after a dog and want to be responsible for a dog. But something flipped about 3 years ago. I think part of it was that my youngest son was about to go off to college, so they were really grateful that I waited until I left the house. But I think I wasn't quite done nurturing. And I saw a friend of mine who had recently gotten a dog, and they had this incredible bond. And I came home and I told my wife, Judy, I said, okay, let's look for a dog. And the first thing we did was we went to a couple of breeders. We didn't find any dogs that we were interested in, and then a friend of a guy in my wife's yoga class said, well, you should contact this group, Labs for Rescue, based here in Connecticut. He said, I got the best dog from Labs for Rescue. So my wife came home and said, what about a rescue dog? And I looked at her absolutely blank, because this is the image that came to my mind when she said rescue dog. I mean, literally, this is my baseline of knowledge about this entire rescue movement. I said, what are you talking about, a rescue dog? So I knew nothing. We started looking online, which is where a lot of people now, where these matches are made. If you've been on Pet Finder, you know it's the Match.com of the pet world. But these are really rescue dogs. Some of the screen's a little bit small, but this picture was taken on one of my trips down south in a Texas shelter. These are rescue dogs. These are shelter dogs. And I'll tell you, this is actually a fairly well-run shelter with thanks to one guy who we're going to meet during the talk, has a fairly high survival rate for the dogs that come in, but no shelter you go in fails to be dispiriting. I mean, just to see these dogs, you know, behind bars with very little to do and very little stimulation. So we started looking at pictures on the internet, and we came across, I'll have to try and stay out of the way, we came across this picture, and there was also a 30-second video of our dog. His name was Albie. That was the name he came with. You can't, unfortunately, this is cut off a little bit. There he is. This was a picture taken of Albie outside the shelter. He was really fortunate, and you know, the dogs that you pick up here in Connecticut, these are true underdogs, and they have to get every single thing to break their way to get here. Albie was in a shelter in Alexandria, Louisiana, maybe some of your dogs came from there, where 9 out of 10 dogs never leave. He was fortunate. There was a volunteer at the shelter who was his guardian angel. She kept him there for 4 months until she and another woman you're going to meet shortly were able to find a home for Albie, and that turned out to be us. Now, I'm telling you, this whole thing was such a mystery to me. So I hear, like Judy's reporting to me that, well, you're trying to find a space on the transport, and I didn't even know what the transport thing was. And I thought the dog was in Connecticut. And then I was surprised to find out the dog's in Louisiana. And
Been there.
but we were already bonded to the dog. You've all had this experience. You fall in love with a dog, and then you wait. And one day, while we knew Albie was in transit, Judy came running in, and she flew down her computer, and she said, "Look, it's Albie." And this was the first picture I ever saw of Greg, and he was the guy, you know, he was the guy driving the dog up, but I didn't really give it much more thought. But, you know, every time something like this happens, your heart leaps forward yet again. So I also have to tell you, if this trip ended, Greg ended up back in Ohio. He dropped off Albie, drove back to Ohio, and arrived, what, 3 hours before your wedding? This is a real commitment, I gotta tell you.
We remember, yeah.
So, the first few weeks Albie was in our house, he slept under the coffee table in the living room. And you start to make all kinds of assumptions. You know, most of us don't know a lot about the history of our dogs. Some of us do. We may know that they came from a hoarding situation or knew they were found as a stray. All I knew is that Albie was found as a stray. We started to make all kinds of assumptions. He'd never been up or down stairs before. He didn't appear to have ever ridden in a car. And he was pretty quiet. About 3 weeks later, he made what I would call literally his leap of faith. And he leaped up on the bed, thereby reaching my last line of defense about having a dog. I mean, I swore, I said, okay, we can get a dog, but he's not sleeping in the bed.
Yeah, right.
And he took one look at this, and I'm like, okay, you can sleep in the bed. Judy will sleep in the guest room, and everything's good. So, but, you know, I look at Albie, and you look at a picture like this, and we didn't know much about him. And I had all kinds of questions I wanted to ask him, which he obviously couldn't answer. You know, were you hurt? Did you have a family? Were they good to you? Were they mean to you? Did you run away? Were you discarded? How did you survive, you know, until you were picked up on a rural street in Louisiana and then brought to a shelter? Didn't know the answers to these questions. I also didn't think by going south I would necessarily find out the answers. But as I was walking, taking him on walks and meeting other people with dogs, everybody's saying, oh, my dog's in Tennessee, my dog's from Alabama, my dog's from Louisiana. I didn't know why this was so. I started to wonder, you know, how did Albie really get to us? You know, I mean, they came on a truck, but who had to get in there and, you know, whose hands and hearts had to be extended to help him make this journey? Now, the shelter where Albie managed to survive, you know, these are some pretty tough numbers. You know, 2 successive years, almost a 90% kill rate. And there's a lot, you know, I'm not going to deal with this whole issue about no-kill shelters. The numbers are overwhelming. Some of these shelters are, you know, they're just, you know, fighting this tidal wave that washes up at their doorstep day after day. When I made one of my trips down south, I went to the Alexandria shelter where Albie had survived. This isn't him. But it was really, that was tough. It was heartbreaking to think of him day in and day out in an enclosure like this with, you know, as you can see, really nothing but a mat to lie on and a bowl of water. But to give you an idea, and this, there are dogs in need everywhere. They're in your back, they're here in Connecticut, Maine, everywhere. But the problem of homeless dogs is really particularly acute in the southern states, as many of you know. And just to give you a sense of proportion, the Alexandria shelter where Albie was, it euthanizes, over 3,000 dogs every year, okay? They have 1/58th the population there of the state of New Jersey, and yet the state of New Jersey only euthanized 1,000 more dogs than these two tiny Louisiana parishes. So if you consider the human population, New Jersey would be euthanizing 180,000 dogs a year if they were doing it at the same rate as these two tiny parishes in Louisiana. So I just got interested. I wanted to find out about what I could about Albie's life, and I decided I would start working backwards. And I thought, well, Greg seemed like the obvious place to start. And I had my wife usually has the ideas that I end up executing. She said, you got to write an article about this guy. And I wrote to Greg, and I think it's fair to say Greg was a little bit wary of having me, maybe a little bit on board. I mean, I was a stranger, and it's those of you who've seen this truck, this is his private world. It's his home, away from home, half of his life. And I was just some guy, he didn't know me, but I persuaded him to let me come down to Allentown, which is where he stops the night before he arrives here in Connecticut to deliver the dogs. And I went out and started my first full trip with Greg at his home in Zanesville, Ohio. And for those of you, I have to be careful here because I know some of you don't know this story, but some of you kind of do. You've either read the book or you have picked up a dog. But Greg leaves his home every other Monday without fail to drive 4,500 miles, okay, over 7 days. And he does that like clockwork. So that's half your life on the road. It's over about 9,000 miles a month. And now having lived it, and by the way, Greg made it clear to me from the first minute, if you're riding, you're working. I offered when I came down to do the parade, I said, I wanted to respect his privacy. I said, I can stay in the motel near where you stop. And he said, no way, you're sleeping in the truck. That first night for the parade story, he gave me his little bunk up in the thing, up in the trailer. But on the longer trips we took, I was sleeping on the floor, wedged in between the kennels, about 24 inches apart, and not nearly as comfortable as it sounds. So I went out, and I met Adela, who's here, Greg's wife, who, by the way, you may not have met Adela or seen Adela, but she makes this operation run too. And then I began my first trip with Greg, and this is the rig that many of you are familiar with. This is, I gotta tell you, having done it, it is the most grueling, difficult, demanding job. Just driving this truck that many miles every other week is demanding enough. You're taking care and loving, 70 or 80 precious animals. If you wanted to make a living as a truck driver, it'd be a lot easier to haul auto parts or water. So I saw firsthand the incredible amount of work, and it's not always, Greg doesn't always look like he does here, when he's on the truck. But I'm going to ask Greg to tell you a little bit about what it's like on the off weeks, because if you think he's only working the weeks that he's on the road, you're mistaken. And I'll just start with one slide. There's one other. This was recently. Greg is very clever because you'll notice who he's positioned under this 300-pound piece of equipment. He's not taking any chances. He and Adela here are replacing an air conditioning unit that failed. But I want Greg to tell you, and I'm going to ask him a few times during this to talk a little bit about some of these things. And talk a little bit about what goes on in between trips.
Everyone generally thinks that I go out and do the trip and I come home and it's my off week. I put my feet up and that's it until the next time. Not so. The week at home is generally more busy than the week on the road. When I'm out on the road, I can tell everybody, hey, I'm out on the road. I can't do that right now. So they save it until the week that I get home. There's the cleaning of the trailer, there's the repairs, there's the logistics of getting next week's dogs lined up. So many people want to talk about so many different things, but the cleaning of the trailer, you've got to take everything out of it. You've got to put everything back in it, and somewhere in between, everything has to be sanitized. In nice weather, that's a good thing. When the wind's blowing, it's horrible. It blows your crates away. You spend most of the day chasing your crates around. When it's freezing outside, your water freezes. When it's 100 degrees outside, you think you're just going to sweat to death. And that generally takes a few days and several different people to do it. Sometimes my mother-in-law will do most of it herself, and yes, that is mother-in-law abuse, but that's where I get mine. So the week at home really is a taxing week. A lot of times being out on the road is the first couple of days, it's a little bit of a breather and a little bit of a refresher, but then the work comes on while you're out there.
So this is, when I was there, you can see that actually is me and Adela and Adela's mom cleaning the trailer, and it was 20 hours worth of work. It took us 4 times 5 basically. It took us 5 hours, 4 of us working, just to prepare for next week's trip. So it's a lot of work. Now, Greg is the first person to tell you, and he really emphasized this to me from day one. He said, look, I'm just one piece in a chain. I'm the tip of the iceberg, and I have the best job because I get to see all the happy endings here, in Connecticut and New Jersey, and deliver these dogs to people who are happy. And he's the face that those of us who, whose dogs he's driven, he's the face we associate with our dog. But it took a lot of people that we never see and whose names we may never know to make this happen. And I'm going to introduce a few of them to you.
Carrie.
Some of you may know Carrie Toth, or at least know her by name. Carrie was the adoption coordinator that we worked with for Albie. Carrie told me she adopts out, she's responsible for about 700 adoptions a year. Now that's an incredible number. She's married with 4 kids, and when I was down in Louisiana, her kids were all grown. I think the youngest is in their late teens. She was about to go on her first ever family vacation because of her devotion to this work. She just can't leave it. She drives Greg a little crazy because she's so busy and so overwhelmed that she's not always ready with all the paperwork and everything when Greg's trying to meet his schedule. But she's 4'9", with a 5-foot heart. She is really something else. And I spent some time with Carrie, and you wonder where the dogs come from. I mean, some of them come from shelters. Some of them may be rescued from hoarding situations or dog fighting rings. Some of them are found in places like this. There are puppies discarded, live puppies discarded into dumpsters. This is in rural Louisiana. This is how people dispose of their trash in these dumpster sites. And this was on a day I went out with Carrie. And I honestly wasn't sure whether I wanted to find dogs because I thought it would be great for the book, or I didn't want to find dogs. It turned out we didn't. But she said almost every time they go out, they find dogs either in the dumpsters or living around the dumpsters, scavenging for food. And this is the kind of thing that, Carrie, I don't know if she wrote this, but this is the kind of thing you see, these heartbreaking scenes, and this is what keeps them going. And I got to tell you, the sacrifices that people like Carrie make are not only financial, but they're emotional, because to a person, everyone I talk to who does this work, to some degree, is haunted by the dogs that they don't save. And trust me, there are fewer victories than there are sad stories. In the end, these captions are cut off, but this is a rural pound in Colfax, Louisiana. This is about as primitive as it gets. It's filthy. There's no infection control. There's not even any shelter here. And if the dogs are even lucky to survive this, they go to the Alexandria shelter. So, dogs that start off here, if they make it to the door of Greg's truck, they are truly lucky. I want to expand on the point of where do these dogs come from. So we had 2 groups of puppies on this one particular trip. These were the S puppies, and this was really interesting to me because these puppies were all their names began with S. They were born to a dog that belonged to a young man in central Louisiana who's now a sophomore in college. And his dog Mia, who is not spayed and lives outdoors like a lot of dogs in the South do, which is partially explains why we have this huge problem, had a litter of puppies, and his dad said, "You got to take them to the pound. We can't afford this." And he knew that was a death sentence. And it's interesting. He turned out to be a very worldly kid who was very aware of how people in the North live differently with their dogs. And he reached out to a woman he knew who actually works with Carrie, and they saved this whole group of puppies. Instead of him taking them to the pound, he got them into the labs and mutts for rescue to adopt out all these puppies. And I know where about 5 or 6 of them are, the siblings are. There was another group on this same transport called the tub puppies, and these were a litter of puppies that were left in a sealed Rubbermaid container and left on the doorstep of a veterinary clinic in Pineville, Louisiana, at night, on a very cold night. And when the staff came in about 7 in the morning, all of them had almost expired with lack of oxygen, and their temperatures had dropped, and they managed to save all of them. So, these are the kinds of circumstances that these dogs escaped to get onto Greg's truck. One of the people I met down in Texas who sends a number of dogs north with Greg is this fellow Tom English, who's a math professor at a community college. And his rescue work is a little bit different. He has kind of adopted the Brazoria County shelter, and he's really helped turn the situation around there. They've been very receptive to his work. He goes there every week. He delivers food and vaccines. They don't have a budget for that. And these are some of the dogs that are there. But this is Tom administering vaccines. He's negotiated a deal with one of the pharmaceutical companies to get a discount. And he gets these dogs ready for adoption, or he's putting in the nails of his puppy. And he'll tell you that the most important thing that he does, though, is to get the picture. The picture that will speak to either a potential adopter or a rescue organization to take this dog. So he worked, this day, I gotta tell you, it was like, in Texas in the summer, it's unbelievable. There are fire ants everywhere, it's 100 degrees, the humidity's off the charts, and they work to get these pictures. The fellow in the orange pants works the shelter every day. He walks over from the neighboring building, which is a state prison. He's a, what they call a trustee. I think it's a county prison, actually. And he works the shelter every day. You see this a lot in shelters in Louisiana, probably in Texas too, where they, use prison labor to staff the shelter. We then went out with another woman named Sarah Manns, and she does what I think you could call street rescue. And again, these are where all the kinds of circumstances where these dogs come from to get to Greg. She goes out into the area near where she lives, near Galveston, and just tries to make some little difference in the lives of dogs like this. Very common to see dogs that live their entire lives chained to a stake, and that many of them are purchased for protection. These are high crime, high drug areas. And if you remove the dog from the situation, you just get another one. It's either here they're untangling this dog's chain. He was so tangled up he couldn't reach his water source, and it was very hot. The chain was almost hot to the touch from the scorching heat. So she's just out there trying to make a little bit of difference in the life of these dogs. And I'm going to show you a little, just to give you an idea, a little video clip of one yard we went to. Where's the sound? Sorry. All right, the sound went off, but I'll just let it go. These dogs, when they see you, they're so desperate for just a pat on the head or for some attention. And, she told me that people who live in this house are drug addicts. The yard is infested with trash and oyster shells, which are really hot. So they're just delivering food here. And one of the things that Tom does, one of the little things he does for some of these dogs, is he makes these wooden pallets and just drops them off at these houses. So when it rains, the rains down there could be torrential, these yards turn to mud, just to give the dog a dry place to go. This is just, these are things, look, Dickens wrote, this is the best of times, worst of times. This is the saddest of stories, but we're going to get to where it becomes the happiest of stories. But you don't have one without the other. Now, this was a total shock to me, and most people are stunned when they hear this. The government, the city government in Houston and the rescue groups agree that there's over 1 million strays living on the streets of Houston. You know, this is the 5th largest city in the United States. It's a very affluent oil and gas town. And it was positively eerie to walk down streets and you don't see any dogs, and you turn around and 10 of them have materialized, seemingly out of nowhere, from under houses, behind cars. So this group, the Forgotten Dogs of the 5th Ward Project, they are also a street rescue. They're going out just to try and improve the lives of these dogs. Because we don't have the sound, I won't play this, but these dogs are pretty skittish. They're not socialized. They're mangy. Many of them have obvious injuries. If they're really in desperate shape, these folks will take them in, try and find a foster, and I'll get to a moment where some of them get to gray. We found this boxer pair, excuse me. The mom was pregnant, living under this house. They both since found their way into homes in the Houston area. But this is a real hero, and this is Kathy Wetmore, who sends a lot of dogs with Greg of Houston Shaggy Dog Rescue. Kathy is really something. I mean, she's a one-person operation, and she pretty much self-finances most of it. And we'll talk about one particular case in a moment. So a lot of the street rescues, if they have me, will call Kathy, can you take this dog? You know, the real challenge for these people is, where do you stop? I mean, how many can you take? How many can you manage? And it's all a numbers game. You know, every dog that gets on Greg's truck makes room for one more in a foster, or you know, one more that a rescue organization can take in. And it's just one story. This is a dog. Some of you may have met him
Noah.
just a month ago.
Yeah.
This is Noah. He came up from Houston. He was found living on a trash heap. Can't read all this, but he had multiple ailments. His feet were scabbed over and insected, dog bites, and he was really pretty far gone. But he began this remarkable transformation. Kathy Wetmore took him into her program, and he started to get better. And you can see here, if you can make out the picture, he's lying on his back. He's very contented, sort of smiling. And Noah finally got better. You know, I've heard people say, why am I paying an adoption fee of $200, $300 for a shelter dog? His vet fees were $10,000, of which Kathy paid $6,000 out of her own pocket, and the adoption fee was $200. Okay, so you know, the people I met, the level of dedication is really quite something. Noah made it all the way to the cover of Houston Pet Talk magazine, and we'll come back to his gotcha day. I'm really sorry this sound isn't working. It was working before, because I'd like you to hear it, but we'll have to do without it. This is one of Greg's favorite people, April Lees, who used to work at Lafayette Animal Aid. Some of you may know her name. But this is where the story starts to turn. You know, these are the lucky dogs, literally, the ones who've beaten all the odds to get to this point. You know, they're right on the verge of getting into Greg's truck and getting a new lease on life. And as most of you know, one of the things that Greg does that really impressed me is that he's not just moving the dog from point A to point B. He's really given a lot of thought to how he goes about it. So every trip is documented on Facebook, because he's building the excitement, he's building your anticipation, because he wants the day that you pick up your dog to be Christmas, Hanukkah, Thanksgiving, every holiday you can think of rolled into one. Because there may be times when you're going to have moments when you wonder if you can do this, and he wants you to remember why you did this in the first place. So, you know, Facebook has been an amazing tool. On one of my trips, we picked up Sadie in Louisiana. She was a sad story because his family had a highly allergic child. They really couldn't. They were heartbroken. But Sadie found a great home here in Connecticut. But she was also special needs. You know, you think it's hard with the 80 dogs in the trailer? Sadie has epilepsy, and she needed to ride in the cab and be given medication on a regular basis. Greg he didn't blink, you know, okay, you know, she'll ride in the mattress in the back of the cab. And she was just so sweet. But now what I want Greg to talk to you a little bit about, you know, some of the other people, and some of them are here tonight. These are the groups that Greg calls the angels, and there are 3 groups of them, and maybe Greg, you can talk a little bit about what they do.
In order for me to get this many dogs to where they're going, I can't do it by myself. I need help. I need lots of help. Along the way, we've organized groups called the Birmingham Angels, and they're angels because they get off their couch in the middle of the night and they come out and they help and they give unconditional love to the dogs. They're helping in several different ways. They're helping me get along the road, but they're also helping the dog in socializing it, in making it have a better ride, in touching it and getting it ready and making it happy. So when we do finally get to the end of the trip, the dog is happy, fluffy, and the first few moments out of that trailer is a positive experience for the adopter. We're trying to set everything up that we can for the dog to win. We don't want the dog to fail at all. So the first few seconds are of so much importance. So many people along the way, along the dog's journey, has put so much into it. I don't want to mess that up for them. I want everything to go right. I want the dog into the home, and I want it to stay there forever. The volunteers along the way help me do this. I have them stationed in Birmingham, in Allentown, and in Rocky Hill. And some of my Rocky Hill people are here tonight. Stand up. You guys are all so awesome. They mean so much to getting the dogs along the way, but you know what? They mean so much to me. I go out on the road, I feel like I'm out there by myself. I'm 4,000 miles away from home. Sometimes I'm scared, I don't know what's going on. I pull in and I see faces that are willing to help. They're like safety nets to me. I've pulled in so many times and seen Sue Bradley's face in the back of the crowd and known that everything was going to be okay because someone was there to help me. There has been so many times that I've been at the end of my rope and because of a breakdown, because of schedule changes, because I've been trying to deal with one particular dog and make it feel better and hold it and everything. And there are people there that can take over that task for me for just a little bit. It's also important, and it's also important of getting the dog along its way. We're in this to help the dogs. There are so many faces that you will never ever see, you'll never ever hear their name, but they were so important in moving that dog and getting it to where it goes.
Don't sit down yet, Greg, because I want to, so this is one of the Allentown Angels. It's really, you know, it's very festive in a way, I would say a lot of times, you know, just, it's a really happy scene, and particularly, you know, they get to Allentown, it's the night before Gotcha Day, which is the day when they're all going to meet their forever families, and Greg will, you know, can tell you that he feels the dogs know that something good is about to happen. But one of those places that Greg always writes a Facebook post is the Mason-Dixon line. Because maybe I can raise this. I don't know if you can read this. You want to read that, Greg?
We've crossed the Mason-Dixon line. All bad memories of being homeless, starved, abused, abandoned, unwanted, unloved are behind us. Our thoughts are on forever families and forever love. Gotcha Day is almost here. Are you excited? Is your welcome sign ready? Get ready. We're almost there. There's a lot to be said in that little post. I've crossed the Mason-Dixon line. I'm from the north, so I've spent most of my week in the south, in the rural south, not seeing anything, not knowing, you know, when are we ever going to get there? Are we going to make it? Or am I going to break down? Am I going to be stranded with these dogs? What's going to happen to me? When I cross the Mason-Dixon, I know I'm within reach of help. So it's a huge boost just to me to get across the Mason-Dixon. It has nothing to do with north and south. It just has to do with my feelings and my comfort level. So, we're going to get to forever families. I'm encouraging the forever families. I want them to make signs. I want them to be happy. I want them to be excited. I was in the restaurant business for a lot of years. I know so much of the battle with the customer is won when the plate hits the table. So I want to get them excited about what's going on. I want the dog to come out of the trailer being fluffy, being happy, and being loved. And when I put the dog into their arms, half the battle is already won. The dog is set up to win. The chances of that home sticking are great. And the chances of that home telling more homes about what a good experience this was, and even more dogs getting out, is set in place.
Sometimes dogs need special attention. Some of these pictures really don't require much commentary. But this is Noah, the dog who started his journey on a trash heap just about a day before, I guess. Got you there, maybe around the Mason-Dixon line.
That was when we were leaving, that was right when we were pulling out of Texas.
Pulling out of Texas.
That was before he even made it inside the truck.
So Gotcha Day is the big day. I think it's the emotional payoff for Greg. Maybe you could talk a little bit about when the sun comes up that morning and you're in Allentown and you know what's ahead.
You know, first of all, I'm looking at this picture and I can see in my face, I can tell you what day that picture was taken. I'm happy. The other days you can see road weary in my face. This is definitely taken on a Saturday. Look at the smile. Everything's good. Even the dog's smiling. Friday night is an awesome night. I've been out on the road with the dogs all week. We've learned to get to know each other. We've went to the bathroom together. We've eaten together. We've slept together. We have done everything that you can possibly do. We've done it together for days. We've became a pack. I can judge what's going on in the trailer by the feel of the trailer and by the feel of everything that's going on inside there. Friday night is magic. It is truly magic. I lay down with the dogs. They're all awake. They all have their eyes on. You can hear tails thumping. You can feel it in the trailer. The dogs know something is going to happen. I really don't believe they know what's going to happen. How could they? But they know something and you can feel it. So, you go to sleep that night, you wake up Saturday morning, and that's when the festiveness starts. You start hitting your stops. It's a love fest the whole way up. If I've done my job correctly, if I've done what I was supposed to do for the dogs and kept them happy and kept everything running on time in the way it's supposed to go to, when I hand out the dogs, there's going to be happy tears. People have waited on these dogs for quite some time. They've watched the Facebook page. I've built excitement. Everything's good. And it washes away all of my breakdowns and all of the hardships that I went through out on the road, and I'm ready to do it again.
You know, one of the trips I took with Greg, the truck broke down in Danbury. It was an airline of the brakes, and you know, it was an expensive repair that was done on site. And the thing that I really admired was that if you were picking up a dog, maybe it was a little bit late, but you would never have known from Greg's demeanor when he got out of the truck to make this hot, you know, this so great for you, what had happened 60 miles down the road. He wasn't going to let that disappointment and that frustration dampen the enthusiasm of those down the road. I'm really sorry that the sound isn't working. I'll turn the computer up, but this is just a little bit of the sights of Gotcha Day. You get a sense of how excited people are. One of the other things that I thought was very thoughtful that Greg often does is if there's a child there to meet the dog, he'll often hand the records, the medical records, in an envelope to the child and says, it's really important that you bring this with you to the first appointment you have with the veterinarian. Just a little thing, but it conveys a sense that there's responsibility involved as well. And I think this is all very well thought out. If you don't think these dogs, you know, it's easy to project, right? We all project what do we think our dogs are feeling and thinking. But, you know, this dog, I don't know, this dog just knows its home. I mean, I just, you know, it's just incredible. Sent me this picture, I don't know. There's really not much to be said. Larry Crawford, who's here.
That's Larry.
Larry Fraser, yeah, Larry took this. I love this picture of Gotcha. It's just one of the pictures that really captures it. And again, I'm sorry for the lack of sound, but this is Noah. He started his journey on the trash heap, but I just want you to see the way he greets his new family, two women from Brooklyn. I mean, and by the way, they've started a Facebook page, with a shaggy dog.
Yep.
You want to follow him? So this is his new family. They live in Brooklyn, and you can follow them. And Greg, you look pretty fluffy yourself. It's hard work, but there you go. So pictures 1,000 words. You don't need for me to say anything. But like I said, it's not just about moving dogs from point A to point B. And this is how Greg signs off. If you follow him on Facebook, this is pretty familiar. You want to talk about that?
I want to read it. I'm 700 miles from a hot shower, a real bed to sleep in, and loved ones that miss me. See you on my next rescue road trip. My name is Greg. I help save lives.
Okay. I was going to end there, then just the other day Adela posted this on Facebook when Greg got home last Sunday, last Monday. And these are Greg's dogs. Now, I got to tell you something. The one with the ball, that's Beans.
Beans.
And when I was at Greg's house, so, Beans comes over, he drops the ball on your lap, and you throw him the ball. Well, it's like he's addicted. It's like a terrible addiction. I mean, he could have done this, till hell froze over. He just kept coming back, and when he would wait for you to hold the ball, he started backing up. And the excitement, I thought he was going to explode. So excited. The other thing I just want to mention, you can't see at the bottom of the slide, is that a portion of all the proceeds from the book are going to go to rescue road trips. And I'll just close with one other photograph that was sent to me by, I forget who sent it to me, are you here? From Connecticut. There you go. Okay. So, Sarah's came north.
That's wonderful.
He's halfway through the book. Very short. So, thank you all for coming. And I'm
going to end it here, guys.